Welcome to Los Angeles and the Petersen Automotive Museum, possibly the best car museum in the world. And we've been given some special after dark access to spend a night at the museum. So let's go and see what we can find. This, all of it, is a Rolls-Royce Phantom 1 Aerodynamic Coupe. But it's known as a Rolls-Royce round-doored coupe. Why? It's got round doors. It's quite simple. This was originally delivered just as a standard Cabriolet Rolls-Royce in 1925, with coachwork not done by Rolls-Royce, but by a British company. And then later on, in 1934, the second owner, that no one actually knows who that was, had it rebodied to look like this. It was made into this shape by a Dutch company called MkIII, and is one of the most extraordinary things I think I have ever seen. There are 2,200 Phantom 1s made back in its first day, but there is only one that looks like this. And it's not to necessarily even just the sheer length of it. Old 1920s Rolls-Royces were this big. It's not the fact that despite having a 7.7 litre engine, it's only got about 105 horsepower. It is just the way the shape has been formed back here, and the fact that it's got windows that open, well, a bit like windscreen wipers, out and down with these suicide doors. The interior is extraordinary, of sort of burgundy coloured wood and material. And then at the back, if you've ever seen an old Tatra, one of those really aerodynamic coupes, it really blends off with a fin, almost as if it's some kind of sea creature rather than a car. It's one of the most extraordinary machines I think I've ever seen. It would not be a surprising statement to say that Bugatti made some, if not all, of the most beautiful cars of the 1930s. However, there was a way to make them even more beautiful, and that was to give them to a company called Ferrari, just like was done with this. This was a Bugatti Type 57C Cabriolet that was then rebodied by Ferrari. And there's a few things that can tell you straight away that it was one of their cars. These stripes down the side can be seen on almost all of the cars that Ferrari made, and the fenders, the incredible teardrop shapes that come all the way down. There's a few other little details which are cool. This had a folding roof that disappeared beneath this metal cowling here, and it could be transformed into a full roadster with a handle inside that would wind down and would bring the windscreen all the way down. But my favourite thing about this car, other than the fact that it's one of the prettiest things I've ever seen, was the fact that its original owner was a man called Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, which might mean nothing to you, but he was the Shah of Iran, a bit of a dictator, a king, as it were, at the time. And this car was not bought by the Shah of Iran, a man with not exactly shortness of money. It was given to him by the French government as a gift. This is a Ferrari 212 with a 225 body, but it's more significant than that. Not only was this the final barchetta that Ferrari ever made, it was also the last road car that Ferrari ever made that was designed by Touring Superleggera. This particular car, though, wasn't just that. This is the only one in existence that's like this, and it was bought by the Ford Motor Company under the name of Henry Ford II. They took it back to Ford, and if you look at it, you can sort of see what they did, because they analysed it, and a lot of this then went into the making of the Ford Thunderbird, including the grille and a lot of that face. Under the bonnet, a V12, not an American V8. Don't worry. James Bond fan? Of course you are. Well, everyone is. Die Another Day. The bit we all remember is the car chase on ice when James Bond had the Vanquish, the Vanish, and Zhao had this, the probably cooler vivid green XKR. And it's here, look at it. There's a Gatling gun on the back. It could fire grenades. It has great big rockets out the front. But somehow it's in one piece despite the fact that the last thing we knew of it, I'm pretty sure it was at the bottom of the ocean. Possibly because this is a film prop, which means that actually, that's not a Jaguar XKR at all. What is underneath is the chassis of a Ford Explorer to give it four-wheel drive so that it would have better traction, because they genuinely filmed it on ice, than the body of an XKR. And inside here you can see that it really was made for some proper precision driving filming, because it's got a roll cage not above where you'll see it, but down in the footwell, and at the back there's a pretty big fire extinguisher that I'm not sure was entirely needed given how much snow was around. If you're looking at this car and thinking, that looks familiar, but something's different, there's a reason for that. This is the first ever Porsche 356, but because it's the first ever one, it's not like all the others. Ferry Porsche, when he made his first car, took most of the mechanicals from the car that his father had designed, Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, the Beetle, and then put a body over it to create the first 356. But it's not rear-engined like most of the 356s. It's mid-engined. The engine is here, so it has a much flatter body. However, once he'd created it, this was exactly how he wanted his sports car to be. So he used this car as the template for everything that followed. And in fact, the car that followed is behind me. It's that, the MkIII Coupe, the first cars to really look like a 356. And this small section right here, this is the genesis of what became Porsche. In 1955, Ferrari debuted a beautiful machine called the 410 Superamerica. It was designed, as many Ferraris were, by Pininfarina. When a man who worked for Ghia saw that, he thought he could do something slightly different. And this is the result. The Ferrari 410 Superamerica by Ghia, which underneath is a 410 Superamerica. It's got the same 5-litre V12, but could not look more different. If that original Pininfarina car looked like the most beautiful kind of classic 1950s design, this looked like something out of the future. It has all-around bumpers for protection. It's got an incredibly interesting front with built-in lights, a bit like the later Boss Mustangs would have. And then as you come back down this incredibly long body, you'll find at the back it's got these fins, and then built into the rear, the exhausts come out of those bumpers. Now, Ferrari himself hated it. He would never pick it up and wouldn't do anything. He thought that the body was too extreme. But little bits of it were carried on, like, for example, these fins, which aren't just found on this. Almost everywhere you look at this museum, you'll find them, like over there on the incredible Alfa Romeo Bat. And then, as we walk around, you'll see they're almost a feature of American motoring that continued. The one-off Cobra here next to me, but perhaps the most extreme version of those fins that you will find anywhere has to be the 1989 Batmobile. I mean, who didn't grow up wishing they could drive one of these? And to see it in the flesh, it really is, well, it really is quite extraordinary. The size and scale of it is incredible. This appeared in two separate Batman films, one in 1989 and one in 1992. But there's a few things that you perhaps need to know about this, because it is not powered, I'm afraid, by a jet engine. That wasn't real. In fact, there's the 327 cubic inch V8 from a Chevy Impala in this, mounted in the nose as low as they possibly could to give it that incredibly long hood, as they'd say over here. This section here, is real. That's really from a jet. It's in fact scavenged from an RAF Harrier jump jet. That is the Rolls-Royce engine components that you could see at the front to give it the effect as if it really was powered by a rocket. But it really doesn't matter what's underneath the bonnet. Of the three of these that exist for people out in the real world to own, if you ever see one, it is perhaps the only car in here that children will run towards when they see. Since we are in LA, there's quite a lot of customs and lowriders in here, but without a doubt, my favorite of them all is this. This is Caddzilla. On the surface, it's a Cadillac sedannette, except there's no surface of a Cadillac sedannette here. This was built in just 180 days by hand for ZZ Top guitarist Billy Gibbons, and it is one of the most stunning pieces of automotive art I think I've ever seen. Under the bonnet is a 500 cubic inch V8, so 8 litres of V8 in there. And there are some touches on this which are just fantastic. Firstly, this isn't black. It may look black initially, but it is a very, very deep purple. And if you come down the side here, you'll see it says ZZ Top on the side. And then here on the steering wheel, it says ZZ Top just behind that massive speedo that only reads to 110, despite the fact that I think it can do a lot more. And in case you recognize this car, it has been on the front cover of several ZZ Top albums. In 1960, the war for the American road was very much at its height. The Corvette existed, Ford had the Falcon, and Plymouth wanted to get in on the act, and they tried to do it with this, the XNR Concept, which was revealed in 1960. XNR because it was designed by a man called Virgil Exner. Underneath, it's a Plymouth Valiant chassis with a slant 6 engine under the bonnet, and this interesting asymmetric style meant to have incredibly low wind resistance. It could do 145 miles an hour when it was new, and it was eventually sold to the Shah of Iran and then bounced around a few owners before it ended up in Lebanon. It stayed in Beirut in a basement during the Lebanese civil war as it hid away and then was thought to be lost for many, many years until it resurfaced in about 2010, having had a full restoration. This is not that original car. This is a car that was built on the Netflix TV show Rust to Riches, and it truly is something that if this had been seen on the streets in the 1960s, everyone would have looked at that way more than any Falcon. If you come with me through this door, there is something truly incredible. And in amongst this room of amazing Ferraris, with a LaFerrari, an Enzo, an F40 and everything else here, they all managed to pale in comparison and importance compared to this, because this is a Ferrari 125S, and this is the very first Ferrari, the very first car that had Enzo Ferrari's name on it. After years running Alfa Romeos for Alfa Romeo and having had involvement with Cisitalia, he decided he wanted his own thing. And this is where he began in 1947. Under the bonnet, there's the first ever Colombo V12, just 1.5 litres at the time. And this car went on to race. There were only ever 2 of them, and it wasn't particularly successful, but this is where it all began for everything else in this room. Now, we at Goodwood are massive fans of Dan Gurney, and this is one of Dan's biggest achievements, especially outside of the driver's seat. This is the All-American Racers Eagle Mark III, as powered by Toyota to multiple IMSA GTP championships, and not just powered to IMSA GTP championships, to the point that it ended the entire class, because the Eagle Mark III won 21 of the 27 races that it entered and so dominated GTP that they kind of just gave up with it. It was driven by Juan Fangio II and Parnelli Jones during that time, and under the back here is a simple inline 4-cylinder turbocharged Toyota engine, but this car weighs somewhere around 830 to 900 kilograms, so it was an absolute rocket ship.